Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah. I'm going to be chatting to you about how we create financially independent kids. It's hard to do. I've got a lot of experience in this space. I've written a book on how to do it. And I've got 2 kids myself, so I know the challenges between the theory and the practical implication. Today, I'm going to be presenting to you for around 45 minutes. I'm going to be kind of moving at pace. If you've got questions, you've got an opportunity to post them in the Q&A section below, and that will feed through to my producer, Jess, who's going to come on at the end and collate some of those questions. Some people have sent questions ahead of time. I believe we're recording tonight's seminar, so if you need to re-watch it, you will have an opportunity. We'll send the link out. And for anyone who's joining us who isn't a client of Enable Me, already working with a financial coach, you'll have an opportunity to have a session with one of our amazing coaches, should you choose to, at the end. There's also going to be a couple of giveaways tonight, so stay tuned for that, and Jess will manage those at the end as well. So let's crack on. Firstly, today's presentation is of general nature. So what I mean by that is your situation will be unique. There will be things that are important about your situation that might change what's appropriate for you to do as it relates to your kids, as it relates to the time or the values that you're trying to apply. So tonight I'm going to talk generally, and the idea is start working with someone else, on designing a financial plan that's going to get you ahead, your family ahead, and be the best role model for your kids, who are going to be inheriting some pretty challenging economic circumstances. So my background, as I said, I am the Enable Me founder, a financial advisor, a chartered accountant, a strategist, a finance communicator, and a coach. I started Enable Me just over 15 years ago, or 16 years ago. I know that because I became pregnant 3 months into that journey, and I now have a 16-year-old son. Heaven help us all. My job when I work with my adult clients, and I've got many young clients, but if I just talk generally, is to give my clients the confidence to make the right financial decision at the right time and to follow through with that. Often, unless you are benchmarking or modeling the example, the options available to you, you don't tend to drift towards the right answer. And just because you know the right thing to do doesn't always mean that you do it. So my job is to give financial confidence, to help my clients do better, to save more faster, to get in control of their money, to get mortgage free faster, to get retirement ready. And as part of getting retirement ready, one of the assumptions is that they have created financially independent kids. And I guess that assumption, I challenged that assumption a few years ago, and I thought, well, while I'm assuming that to be the case, how many of my clients actually have created financially independent kids? And if they haven't, what should they do? And if they're just having kids, what does that look like? And that's what I'm going to try and paraphrase for you in this evening's presentation. If I was to translate the effort we put into our clients to the result or the output, we tend to increase the savings rates of our clients by 300%. We get them mortgage free within 8 years rather than 30. If they're not on the property ladder, perhaps are young and saving for their deposit, we aim to get them on that ladder within 2 years of working with us, earlier if we can. We want to understand what they need for retirement, and we want to create $1 million worth of improvement in the period of working with us. So we're prepared to put our money where our mouth is. And if you're a parent, you know that every day is about putting your money where your mouth is. If you are a parent of a teenager or a preteen, if you're not doing what you say you are going to do, especially when it comes to money, don't expect your kids to do what you say. I wouldn't, right? They've got to learn to discern. And if you're wanting to influence your kids financially, I think the most effective thing you can do is to have your own finances in control and a plan in place. But let's kind of break that down. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about how we teach financial independence to kids and how that changes depending on the age of the child and your life stage. So there's a few things there. We're going to talk about how we balance your financial future with their financial needs, wealth creation strategies for the family, protecting your family's financial future, how a coach can help you navigate some of those things. And then I'm going to take you through some question and answers if we've got some time. And there is a giveaway of a couple of products at the end as well, which should be fun. So, I think the financial conditions that our children need to thrive in are much harder than what we needed to thrive in, and harder than our grandparents. So obviously house prices are higher, income hasn't kept up with house prices. Since our grandparents' day, we've had student loans introduced, we've got just general loans being accessible. In my grandparents' day, credit cards hadn't even been invented, right? So we've got a whole lot of debt, we've got consumerism, we've just got challenges. And normally when things get harder, you're supposed to be better. That's how you fight against it getting harder. Yet we have a generation, and my children are part of that generation, where the conditions are harder and they don't seem to naturally be better. And this tools that were relevant for our grandparents or even ourselves are seldom relevant for them. For example, we would say to our grandparents would say, look, delay your gratification, spend less than you earn, and you should be okay. They could say that because it was true. Whereas now, even if you delay your gratification and live within your means, you're still unlikely to buy a house. That's crazy. The average age for buying a house is now 36, and the average mortgage size is 30 years. So on track for this generation, which is older than our kids, they're not going to be mortgage free by retirement. So it's not helpful to say, well, if you just delay your gratification, you'll be okay. It's not helpful because it's not true. Or then we might say, well, if you bought a house, just buy a house as quickly as possible, because that's what our grandparents did. That's actually one of the worst things you can do financially if you're trying to build momentum. Getting onto the property ladder, perhaps through an investment property, can make a whole lot more sense as an owner-occupier. So again, some of the tools or just the references that we've been brought up with isn't particularly helpful. And because the conditions are harder and we're supposed to be better when conditions are harder, we're not seeing that with this generation. My kids' generation, your kids, or even the generation in between us, they're worse. Possibly a sense of entitlement, but I don't think that's really the issue. I think that the conditions are just harder and they're not equipped to deal with it. We see them sleepwalking into student loans to get a degree that they aren't going to apply. We're seeing 1,000% increase, 1,000% increase in 25-year-olds declaring themselves bankrupt. Why are some of these things happening? We don't want to sleepwalk into your financial future. So we want our kids to succeed, of course, but we need them to succeed without undermining the financial progress that we need to make. And striking the balance is possible. It's unlikely you're going to get it right just by hoping, because it requires some discipline, sequencing, clinical execution, rigor, and example, right? You've got to practice what you preach here, babe. Otherwise, your kids are going to call BS on it. And that is a good thing if they do. So let's get your house in order. But let's talk about where most people sit. So I guess before we talk about how we want our kids to be financially independent, we need to first recognize that 50% of Kiwis are not prepared for retirement. And I'm a believer that retirement planning and getting your kids financially independent go hand in hand. So I'm going to assume that if only 50% are prepared for retirement, that means at least 50% don't have financially independent kids. 56% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, insane. And 74% of Kiwis worry about money. So that's kind of the backdrop. And then in addition to that, we've got 1 million adult children living at home or being supported by their parents financially. And 25% of those between 18 to 34 are continuing to live at home. And they're doing that for a variety of reasons. It could be easier. It could be just more practical. It could be they can't afford to move out. It could be that mum doesn't want them to move out. We had in the McQueen household, we had a bit of an ultimatum this week where my 16-year-old son was being irksome. And my husband said, Cam, you're moving out in 2 years, so I suggest you make the most of your time here and live more socially acceptable with the family. Cameron replies, I'm not moving out at 18. And Billy replies, yes, you are. And Cam says, you can't make me. This is my house as much as it's your house. This is a 16-year-old, painful. And then Billy replies, well, either you move out or we move out, but this journey, it's coming to an end in 2 years. Right, we jest, but there's a part of me that doesn't want my son to move out because I love him and I want to make sure he's okay, right? So you kind of self-sabotage their own success. So there can be genuine reasons why kids aren't moving out, but one of them is that they aren't financially capable. They can't afford to move out. So this is the backdrop, and I'm a believer that if I'm going to give you advice, I want it to be relevant in the current circumstance, not to be romantic, not to be a gesture, but actually practical application to improving an outcome. So if we're going to teach financial independence, what do we need to know? The first thing is you've got to fix your own oxygen mask first before you worry about your kids. What that means is I need to know that you're on track for retirement before I start to work out how we're going to help your kids. And one of the things I'm trying to help your kids is I'm trying to get them onto the property ladder as quickly as possible. That is the easiest way to de-risk their ability to stand up financially. And of course, you're teaching the kid this, but if I'm working with my clients, I'm also, we've factored this into our own retirement planning, where we might say, look, we're going to need one investment property for our own retirement, but let's get two. So the second one can be earmarked to helping the kids onto the property ladder at some point in the future. Because if they're not on the property ladder, if they're not thriving financially, sure as eggs, you're going to help them. Of course you would, you know. Even if you didn't want to, it becomes your problem. So if we can build in some of those buffers early, that would be good. So fix your own oxygen mask first before we worry about them. We make sure you're sorted for retirement. We align your wealth goals and needs with what the kids are going to need. And in the absence of them knowing what they need, having money, a lump sum payment in their mid-20s is helpful for either being a deposit for a property, if they wanted that, a deposit to start a business, or money that they can repay their student loan. Having a lump sum payment when it is helpful is helpful. And so often with inheritances, I think the problem with inheritances, because eventually it goes to the kids eventually, but it's too late. No one dies when it's helpful, where that money really would have made a difference. And I think when kids are in their mid-20s and they are looking for a pathway forward, it's a whole lot easier to find a pathway forward if you've got capital to set you up. Now, the problem is most parents don't have that capital, and the only way they're going to be able to do that without sacrificing their own future is to use their equity to buy a property that gains in value, and that value is what is earmarked for the kids. Of course, we need to teach the kids about their money habits and try and discipline them with that. But maybe most importantly, we need to be teaching them the money story we want them to carry forward. Because your behavior as a parent, just as your parents' behavior to you, is one of the most, I was about to say damaging, the direct influences of their own relationship with money. I'm going to talk about money stories in a second, but we've got to look behind the curtain if we're going to truly help our kids with this. So if you are a financial failure, one of the best things you can tell your children is that. And then what are you going to do about it? Because just because you find it hard to get ahead or you've made mistakes doesn't mean you can't engage in your future. If anything, you've got to have more hope and more discipline because of that, right? So anyway, whatever we need to do is going to depend on what your financial goals are, what your goals for your kids are, what your values are, where you're at in your life stage, what kind of hand of cards you've got to work with, and what are your kids' ages. You've got to give appropriate lessons for appropriate ages. What we know about money if you want to get a bit depressed, is from 3 years old, kids can grasp financial concepts like spending and saving. And by 7 years old, money habits are fairly well formed. If I look at my kids, I've got Madison, who's 11. She is a spender. Oh my gosh, it is frightening. Cam is just tight, a bit of a bludger, right? He's tight because he lets other people pay. Horrible. But these are things to be mindful of. Now, if you're a spender, your strategy to getting ahead is different than if you are a saver or if you're tight. There's no point pretending it's going to be easy for you to stick to a budget. We need to distract you with other things, and the impact of that is that you still get the budget sorted. But we've got to understand what you are and what you're not to then design the most effective strategy to get you to your financial goal. If I break things down, and I'm working backwards from what do I want to achieve at different life stages, this is the guide that I use with my own clients and what I use with our coaches and their clients. So I guess if we start at the bottom, by their early 20s, we want to have secured an investment property for them. That's what we want to be able to do. How we do that depends on what we've got to work with and how early we started. If we start right at the beginning, when your age is 3 or 4, that's when we tend to introduce them to wants versus needs and delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is quite a hard concept to teach kids when everything is instant, but we work on it. Between ages 5 to 9, that's when we're introducing the basic concepts of money, pocket money, saving, earning. I think too much emphasis is put into the saving and the spending and giving, and not enough emphasis is put into you actually need to earn money to do those things. This is also when you start to introduce family outings and the kids being responsible for the management, the cost management of those outings. I can give you a couple of examples of that as well. You're trying to build on the different concepts as you go. Between 10 and 13, that's when you want them to start taking a degree of financial responsibility. So you're giving them a living allowance and managing their budget around that. Living allowance is different to pocket money. Pocket money you earn, living allowance is dedicated funds for specific costs. Between 14 to 16, this is, I guess, where the rubber hits the road, right? You've got kind of between 2 to 4 years before they're out in the big bad world, where the banks are trying to flog credit cards, or worse yet, they've made a decision to get a student loan, which doesn't need to be a bad thing necessarily, but the problem with a student loan is one of their first financial decisions and one of their biggest financial decisions most people sleepwalk to. And the impact of getting a student loan for something that isn't going to give you the return could be 10 to 15 years delay in you getting on the property ladder. Comes at a big cost, right? So you've got to make sure the trade-off is right. There's never a right or wrong outcome, but understand the trade-offs. And if you're teaching your kids, that's something that you really kind of have to just drill into them. And it's funny because Cam, he's got ADHD, and apart from that just being painful to try and parent, obviously, and as a parent, like you tell your kids off, I don't know, something like 50,000 times in their teenage years, there are some things you really want them to pay attention to. And so you're trying to distinguish between all the noise in their head to say, okay, well, if you can only think of one thing to do with this topic, what is the one thing I want you to know? And I've tried to break that down for each of these age groups. So 14 to 16 is when you're talking about the family finances, where you're actually sharing where you're at financially. You're sharing how much money is coming in, how much money is getting saved, your own retirement plan if you've got one. And this is when you would introduce cost management of regular things, like perhaps the grocery shopping, where you want the kids to start to menu plan, you want them to go to the supermarket, you want them to find savings, just kind of practical implications, practical applications of what you're trying to teach them at home. Between 16 to 18, that's when you teach them goal setting. So it certainly is going to help if you've got a goal and you know how you're tracking to it. You're talking about taxes, compound interest, and debt. You're getting them to think about what their income pathway is. My view, no point doing something unless you're going to get an income from it if you're studying for it, or if you're incurring a debt to learn it. it would be bad debt if there's no income attached to it, right? And then we want to know what your mistakes are. It can be quite cathartic to share those, but I think your best financial lessons, again, truncated into a couple of points, and that might be the story that they apply for themselves going forward. I think failures, I don't really believe in failures, they're all just learnings. And from 18 to 22, we'd be wanting a plan to get them onto the property ladder, so they feel in control and they're moving forward. Some people ask me, should you pay pocket money? And the answer is yes, you should, but they do have to earn it. You don't pay them for doing nothing, as I tell my children. If they do extra, pay them more if you can afford. Make sure it's an equal opportunity household. We don't want the boys getting paid more than the girls. And some of the jobs that they do shouldn't be remunerated, in my view. There's sort of a minimum threshold to live in the family that you want them to contribute to that you don't really think is going to be paid for. But, you know, I'm a believer of pocket money, which is separate to an allowance, right? Kind of the core concepts, if you're teaching your kids budgeting, you want to teach them about want versus need and giving and earning. For older kids or teens, that's when you want to start to introduce a budgeting spreadsheet or app. We've got a few apps that we use. I know that with my kids, I also have an app to measure the chores that they do and what they're entitled to be paid. Encourage them to be part of the household grocery shop. So that's where you're sitting down, you're saying, well, this is how much we budgeted for the week. These are the things we need to buy. Off you go, do the grocery shop. And if you come in under budget, what I do is I split it 50-50 with the kids. So they're incentivized to spend less and be really conscious of their money. This is also where they might work out or manage the family holiday, where, again, I just tend to split the difference with them. That seems to be a language that they follow. We went on a family holiday for a weekend. Cameron was in charge of it. The costs and the planning and what we did with the budget that we had. And I said, look, what you don't spend, I'll split with you. He was so tight. I think I lost a kilo on the weekend. We weren't allowed to eat food. We weren't allowed to do anything. And it was amazing. He came in under budget. And I said to him, I said, Cam, you did such a good job. You can plan the next holiday. And he said, no, you're in charge of that, Mum. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, because we want to spend money. Yeah, because I'm a spender, if that isn't clear. You want to be open about your finances. If you disagree with your partner around money, talk about that, right? Otherwise, the money story that your kids are taking forward might be, don't talk about money, because that's just going to end in an argument. Like, there's some pretty damaging stories that you're unconsciously passing on to your kids if we don't start bringing this out into the open. Understand your money tendencies, your lessons, your goals, and be open about where you're tracking to those goals. Make it fun, like for kids. So as they get closer to the end of their teenage years, this is possibly less relevant, but some games that I would encourage you play with them: Monopoly, Settlers of Catan, the Cash Flow, or the Rat Race game. I think that's particularly relevant to teenagers going forward. We've got a property. We've got another game there that we want to give away, and one of the apps that I use with my kids, although it's under construction at the moment, is Square One. So that's quite cool to manage your pocket money. But practice makes perfect. So get them to save for big ticket items, get them to research and price compare, involve them in the household spending budget, the holiday planning, get them to manage their own clothing budget. All this should be done by the time they're age 13. Then we want to introduce them to investing, whether that's in Sharesies, whether it's we want to set up term deposits, just so they're playing around with these things and possibly realizing that. I remember I did an exercise with Cam. I'm like, okay, well, let's put this money in the bank. Maybe it was $1,000. And I was trying to illustrate the idea of compound interest. And I'm like, look, if we leave the money in the bank for a year, you're going to make $5 or something like that. And he's like, well, what's the point? And I think that's also a good lesson, right? If the interest isn't strong enough, the benefit of compound interest isn't that exciting. Good point. Take them to financial meetings. So I encourage my clients to bring their kids to the meetings with me, because I want the kids to catch the idea that this doesn't happen by chance. Mum and dad are planning, they're making choices, they're reevaluating priorities, and they're adjusting as things change. And that money should be mastered. It shouldn't be emotional. It should just be mastered. And what's your plan? So understand your money story and the story your kids are picking up, because their financial success starts with your success or failing. And even if you've been I guess you're not confident or comfortable with what you've achieved financially, let that be the start of the conversation. Explain why. Explain the impact of that, why you care. Like, let's kind of cut through the noise, the romance, and say it is going to be hard for you. We're trying to prepare you for what you're about to face. Start by understanding your spending tendency, your beliefs around money. Some mindsets are scarcity-based or fixed, and they don't think it's going to change. Some are abundance-based. Some people have a poverty mindset. Some people have a wealth mindset. And it's shaped by your childhood and your upbringing, your personal experiences, your cultural backgrounds, your friends, and education. I had one client who was a 50-year-old woman earning huge amounts of income, had short-term debt, and wasn't on the property ladder. And I said, why aren't you on the property ladder? And she said she sort of feels guilty because her friends earn less than her, so she feels the need to be generous with them, and it's to her own detriment. I asked her to describe her money personality, and she said she's fast and she's loose. I liked her immediately. Or I had a young client who was about 22, and they seemed, maybe 23, they seemed incapable of saving. And I said, I don't understand why you can't save. Can you help me? There's money left over. Why do you then consciously go and spend that money? And they said, well, when I was growing up, we never had any money. And when I did come into money, either through a job or whatever the case is, my parents or my siblings took the money from me to spend on themselves or the house. So I never got to keep my own money. And so my lesson, or the story I told myself, is I need to spend this before someone spends it for me. So these are pretty powerful money stories, right? You can see how that undermines their own success if that's how they're thinking. Or, I mean, there's plenty of money stories. Some of them, my parents argued about money, so now I associate money discussions with a blow up, so I avoid money discussions. The leading cause of relationship breakdown is financial stress, and financial stress is the result of not being able to have the right conversations. It becomes emotional or defensive, or you want to challenge your partner in one of their assumptions, but they interpret that as, you don't believe in me anymore, right? Like it's so emotive money. Or people like me will never be wealthy. I hear that from some clients. Or the universe will provide, so I don't need to worry. I slap those ones. Right? But it's powerful, and you are teaching your kids a money story at the moment. So one of the things I would ask you is to reflect on, what is the money story they're going to be picking up? And then the next story or the next point you want them to know is that, of course, you need to be earning money. And in theory, you think the more money you earn, the better you will be. We do think that. Apart from our experiences, the more money you earn, that just seems to give you permission to spend more rather than get ahead faster. Financial progress is less to do with your income levels and more to do with your behaviors around money and how your strategy adjusts to those behaviors. So who you are and what you're not. Starts with your money personality. You're either a shopper, a saver, or a plodder. A shopper is someone who just finds it easier to spend money. It's not that you can't save. Anyone can save. It's just you don't get excited by saving. It doesn't really fill your cup. So you spend. Or a saver is someone who does get energized by saving. They love it. Of course, that's fun. And of course, that's an advantage if that's the way you're programmed. I'm a spender. So I don't get excited by saving. I get excited by hitting big financial goals, and I can save if I'm excited by the goal, but I'm just not inclined to do it for the sake of it. So knowing that about myself is helpful. My husband is Scottish, so he's tight. So he just doesn't spend money. Equally, he doesn't know how to grow money. right? So I'm pretty good when it comes to growing money and sticking to a plan to achieve a goal. I just don't like saving. That's me. A plotter is someone sort of in between. They can save or they can spend. They kind of aren't in any particular extreme. Then what's your approach to risk or your appetite to ambition? Are you safety conscious? Are you an adventurer where the bigger the goal, the more energized you are? Or are you a dreamer where you believe that the universe will provide for you and it will be okay in the end? And I do think it will be okay in the end, because I don't think money necessarily makes you much happier. But just because okay in the end just means that you haven't died prematurely. So you can still be okay in the end, but if you haven't saved enough for retirement, you're just moving out of your house earlier. You're downsizing earlier. You're probably stressed, and you're not able to help your kids. It's still okay in the end. No one's died as a result of it, but I don't know, that for me, that's not success. That would be disappointing if that was my financial future as I approach retirement. Then I need to know what's your willpower or your motivation to act, because everyone wants to be financially successful, yet very few people are. That's a good point to point out to your kids. And why is that? It's because wanting an outcome doesn't translate to doing it or achieving it. But depending on how you respond to expectation will determine the way you should be supported to achieve it. So if you gave a goal to yourself, and if someone else gave a goal to you, and you could only do one of those things, what do you find easier to do? This is how you test your willpower. So let's say my internal goal, my goal was I want to learn how to run a marathon. And let's say the external goal given to me by someone else, say my boss, is I need you to send this document to shareholders tonight. And that's at the exact same time I was going to go for my training run for the marathon. So we've got competing goals. And you don't really know where you're at in life until you've got to make trade-offs and choices, right? When you've got plenty of time and nothing's conflicting, you can do it all. But in this situation, what do I find easier to do? Well, if I am an upholder, I will prioritize my goal over someone else's goal. So I'll say to my boss, I can't send that tonight. I'm actually going for a run. Don't know how helpful that would be, but that's what I would do. And I guess a positive example of an upholder is a high performance athlete that blocks any form of distraction from the goal that they have latched onto. If you are an upholder, you do tend to be an overachiever. And if we know that about you, then we design the financial plan to reflect that. Knowing that about your kids can be helpful as well. At the other end of the spectrum is a rebel. A rebel is someone who doesn't set goals for themselves and doesn't appreciate other people giving them goals. I would say my Cameron is a rebel. I would say to him, Cam, do you want to bike to school or do you want to walk to school? And his response will be, I don't want to go to school. Rebels are annoying. You hope they grow out of it. Financial rebels are dangerous. My advice would be don't marry a rebel who is a dreamer and a shopper. That will end in tears. A questioner is someone who gets their confidence by kind of asking a lot of questions. And an obliger is someone who feels obliged to satisfy other people's requirements before they get to their own. Mums are great obligers, but 70% of the population are obligers. If you are an obliger, then we need to bring in some external accountability for you so that your goals aren't immediately subordinate to someone else's expectations on you. An example would be everyone wants to be fit, everyone wants to be healthy, everyone wants to be financially successful and have good relationships. We all want that, but by the time we get to the end of the day, we're exhausted and we'll choose where do we put our effort. And often the things that are most important to us don't even get the time of day because we've exhausted our willpower on other people's requirements. That's a classic obliger. Okay, so what we know about families is that they fritter 15% of income on average. If we were looking for that for our clients, and the way we look for it is different depending on if you're a shopper or a saver, but we would expect to lift your savings rate by around 300%. So whatever you're achieving at the moment, we'd be able to lift that. We want to get you mortgage free in 8 to 10 years. We want you to be buying an investment property, building wealth for retirement, and maybe buying a second property that's earmarked for your kids. They might not need that money for another 10 years, but we get it underway. For me personally, I've got a couple of properties for my kids. Not that you tell them, not convinced telling them is a good thing, and especially for Cameron, because there's a chance that we're going to disown him anytime soon, especially if he doesn't pass his NCEA. But I think just knowing it's there is helpful. And when the weekly top up to this property is in line with what you're going to put into a savings account for them, well, it makes a whole lot more sense to be leveraged to be buying a property, because your return is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars higher for your kids taking a wealth maximizing route than just putting the money in the bank. And all money does, it creates options, it improves your security, it removes anxiety, helps you solve problems, it allows you to be ambitious and to leave a legacy. But most importantly, money sorts your retirement. So I'm just going to talk about how retirement feeds into your thinking, because I'm a believer you've got to have your own household sorted before you worry about, or your own situation sorted before you worry about teaching your kids. But when I say I need you to be retirement ready, that means at retirement age, let's assume that that's 65. For some people, it could be older. For some people, it could be earlier. But at that point, I need you to be mortgage free on your home and to have saved at least 25 years of living costs. And that works out to be different numbers to different people, but really crassly, you're going to need to be mortgage free and have at least $1 million in the bank account. Now, some of that money might come from your KiwiSaver. Maybe 40% comes from KiwiSaver, but the balance needs to come from somewhere else. And in addition to that, I need you to have created financially independent kids. So just bear with me for the next couple of slides as I try and bring this to life. So this is a client who was on track to be mortgage free at 65. So you can see their mortgage, which is that blue line. At 65, they've paid off the mortgage, which is amazing. Only a third of Kiwis are on track to do that, but it's still amazing. At 65, they then get paid their KiwiSaver. So that's the higher money that gets cashed in. And then they live off that KiwiSaver. And they run out of that money at age 69. And I'm trying to get them to age 90, living a lifestyle they enjoy, feeling good about things. So I've got a gap between ages 69 and 90. That's what we call the wealth gap. And it's different for each person, but by and large, it's about $1 million if we're just cutting through it. So then I say, well, hey, that's if you do nothing. You've got a gap, but I'm going to actually improve your situation, and that's going to transform what we have to work with. So I'm going to get you mortgage free in 10 years rather than 20 years, which was the case here. Because we mortgage free at age 55, I can now save towards retirement, and I don't have a mortgage to pay, so I can save a whole lot more. And so what's cool about that is I do save a lot more before I hit retirement. And of course, I still get my KiwiSaver paid out at 65, but with all that compounded and combined effort, I've now got enough wealth that's going to feed me until age 80. So if I looked at your initial situation, I'd say, look, you're just comfortably inefficient, but I'm going to get you more efficient, get your money working for you better. And that's what then moves you or reduces the wealth gap by 11 years. It's still not enough to get you to 90, just because I haven't yet got your money working harder. I've just got you doing it as smart as possible, which removes the inefficiencies. So then I say, well, I want to actually get you to 90. So let's say I've improved your baseline, which means we can save a whole lot more just naturally before retirement. And then I'm trying to stretch those savings or get them working harder for you so that they're going to stretch until 90. And that's where your investment strategy comes in. And with your investment strategy, I've got to say, well, I've got a whole lot of options that I can work with to close your retirement gap, but not all of them are suitable, and not all of them are going to actually do the job that you need. Now, most Kiwis, I would say 80% of our clients at least, have a retirement gap, especially if they're trying to position their future to be able to help their kids onto the property ladder as well. When you've got a gap of more than $300,000, the most probable way for you to close that gap reliably or with predictable outcomes is by investing in an residential investment property that you can afford to hold until you get the gain on that property. You might hold it for longer, but we need you to be able to get access to the funds. And as a rough rule of thumb, I'm trying to get about $500,000 growth on an investment property for it to be a successful investment. And I'm trying to do that as quickly as possible. And not all properties are created equal. And of course, I need to de-risk and diversify your investments once I have created your wealth. But you don't diversify before you create the wealth, because all that does is slow you down and not solve your problem. So we work through that, and I'm not saying that property is the right answer for everyone, but for most of us, it is part of the mix of what we need to be considering for our own retirement. Where it gets quite interesting with your kids is that you can be buying a property jointly with them if they're kind of in their early 20s and do have some income but not access to capital. Or it could be that you're buying a property outright for them that's just simply earmarked for them in the future. You're going to sell the property or refinance that property to access the capital that you can then give to them. It's a really fun process to work through when your teenage kids are getting involved in that. It opens their mind and it keeps them focusing on what's actually going to make a difference to their own financial future. But remember, your ability to get to this point means you've had to take care of yourself first. So remember, I just can't overstress this. Your kids learn through observation. If your kids are like my kids, they're going to call BS if you're saying something but doing something differently, or they're just going to ignore it. So invite your kids to see how you're managing your money better. They will learn to follow suit. And if you're not managing your money in a way you would be proud of teaching your kids, let's change that. And let's take them on the journey of that. Because isn't that so powerful that mum and dad reflected on they weren't on track for their financial success, and that success is so important to them that they made adjustments and they took us on the journey of that. I think that's just so powerful. So I'm all for providing a safety net to your kids, but don't let that safety net become a hammock. Balance is key. And sometimes your kid hearing a message from someone else is more effective than you harping onto them. So if you were going to work with Enable Me, we're going to do some giveaways in a second, but we'd love you to have a session with one of our financial advisors or coaches. And their job is to diagnose your situation, understand what would happen if you keep doing what you're doing, and is that enough to achieve your financial goals? And if it is, great. But if there's a gap between what you're on track to do and the goals that you have or the goals that you need, then they're going to work out how can we lift your capability, how can we get your money working harder, and what's our strategy to grow wealth and get you more efficient. Then they're going to diagnose your tendencies, because depending on who you are or what you're not, different strategies are going to be more effective. They're going to move you forward faster and increase the odds of you getting to your destination. And if that destination is important to you, or if your margin of error to get there is slight, you've got to have someone in your corner. You've got to. They're going to do the heavy lifting, they're going to give you the plan, and they're going to keep you accountable to it. If you want to book in with one of our coaches, that initial session is normally $400. It's discounted to $149 if you book, I don't even know what the day is, or let's just say by the end of the week, in the next day or so. So you don't need to have the meeting anytime soon. You could have it in a couple of weeks if you want, but just redeem that discount in the next 24 hours would make good sense. And if you want to take a bit longer before you redeem it, you still do get a discount, but it just reduces. So you get the initial meeting for $249. And depending on what you want to achieve, how big the goals are will determine what program is appropriate for you. Our programs range in length and intensity. Some are as short as 12 weeks, some are as long as 13 months. Some are very simple, focusing on cash flow management. Some are focusing on behavioral change, mortgage reduction, wealth maximizing, sorting retirement, and sorting your kids. So the costs range depending on the goals that you're trying to achieve and how quickly you need to achieve them. A normal program, a 12-month program, just I guess as a guide, is between $5,000 to $6,000. It can be as low as $1,500, and it could be as much as $10,000, depending on how ambitious you want to be. And in year 2, the cost is about $1,500 a year to work with us. The return on investment for working with us, you're normally about 10,000% better off. So the return's there, but you got to be up for it. I have joined a gym and not turned up, so I know it's possible to want an outcome without actually wanting to do anything differently. But we're going to change that with your finances. I've got some Q&As, which I'm going to get Jess to read to us. And Jess, if you want to do the giveaway as well.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Sorry, can you hear me very well?
Yeah.
Great. We're going to kick off with the giveaway. So, starting with Hannah's book, Kill Your Mortgage, Sort Your Retirement. She is generously giving away one of those books tonight. And I have just put all your names in a hat, so I'm drawing it out this second. And the winner of the book is Lisa Chapman. Nice. So Lisa, we'll email you on the email that you registered for tonight. So yeah, congratulations. And then we've got Hectics that has generously given us 2 of their board games to give away. So that's a really fun game for your kids to learn how to manage their money. So let's draw some names out of the hat. We have got, drum roll, Catherine Coghill. So congratulations, Catherine. We'll email you tomorrow. And then the next one, let's go. And the winner is Matt Cronin. Congratulations. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm now going to move on to some questions that we have received. So let's kick this off. So the first question is, do you have any advice on how to encourage children who have savings to take the step to purchase a property?
Yeah, so I guess it depends how much savings they've got and whether they've got income attached to that. Normally just having a session with one of our coaches is a good way to start. And if they're potentially going to need to draw on more capital from you or income from you so they can get qualify for borrowings, best you are both at that meeting. But it kind of blows some of these kids' minds when they can secure a property kind of as early as 20 or 22 or whatever the case is. They just don't know how to do it. So to be able to fast track that for them is amazing. I do think that the narrative that's getting spread is that it's impossible for our young people to get ahead, which I think if they are applying the tools of old is impossible. In fact, there was a study where they interviewed 25 to 35-year-olds, and they said, you know, what's the most common measure for making financial progress? And they said, well, being able to get onto the property ladder is the most. 88% of people said that's kind of the most socially accepted measure of getting ahead, is getting your first property, which makes sense. And then the next question that was asked of them is, and who thinks they're going to be able to do that? And less than 10% of people thought they could. That's really dangerous for a society. It's dangerous for your kids, right? If they don't have the hope of a better financial future, they make the wrong choices because they think, well, what's the point? And I understand that. Why would you bother trying unless it was going to create an outcome that was meaningful? So back to if they're going to buy a property, I think the best thing you can do is to have a session with one of our financial coaches or advisors to show them how that's possible and to support them on the journey of determining, well, what is the right property? What's the property criteria? How do we shortlist those properties for you? And how do we get serious about positioning you to create a lot of wealth? Or not even a lot of wealth, just enough wealth is fine.
Amazing. Thank you, Hannah. This one is around just creating the excitement for how encouraging your kids to invest. So the question is, where is the best place to invest our children's money? In my day, I had the enjoyment of watching my ASB piggy bank account climb with monthly updates. So what strategy do you think will give my children the same buzz?
Yeah, it's hard because their buzzers come from different places now, and it depends on the age of the kids. You know, like if the kid's 8 years or under, you can get a buzz from pretty much anything. I find an app with my daughter. I run an app where we're tallying what's her bank balance, what is she adding to that bank balance. She's got we've got 2 bank accounts, one for spending, one for saving, and there's of everything she earns from her pocket money, 25% has to go into compulsory savings, and she's managing that with an FPOS card as well. It's hard. My experience is the kids don't get the same level of excitement when they're teens as what we got. Because I remember filling in our little ASB or Westpac passports, money passports, banking passports, and see kind of depositing 50 cents each week, and it was just so exciting. Whereas that just is not really all that fun when they get older. So I think it's coming back to what's something that they want for themselves. Like if let's make it selfish if it's going to be the effective way of getting it for them. And shoppers, as an example, will not be excited by saving, and they're pre-wired a particular way. So you've got to make the trade-off worth their while to put effort in to save. But I think finding something that they are wanting to purchase and save for could be the most effective way. So they know what the savings is going towards, and they're getting closer, and you're measuring how close you can get rather than possibly just the savings existing in the first place.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah. This one is around pocket money. So you already gave us some incredible tips on around pocket money. This one is, what is your recommendation in terms of determining how much to give?
Yeah, well, I think pocket money plays more of a role in under 10s than so I would be wanting to give at least $1 for every year of age, sort of as a minimum, but maybe up to $2, depending kind of on your particular situation and the jobs that they can do for you. From 10 years old, it sort of needs to be a bit harder to earn money, you know, like my 11-year-old had a tooth come out the other day, and she's like, well, what's the tooth fairy paying nowadays? And I'm like, babe, the tooth fairy is dead. That kid died when you hit double digits, right? So the ability to kind of extract money from the system kind of dies as they get older. But I just think that I would be paying $1 to $2 for their however old they are. So if they're 7 years old, you're either giving them the opportunity to earn $7 to $14 worth of income for jobs that are appropriately priced.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question, so let's round it off with this one. You gave us a lot of amazing lessons on what we can teach our kids. So if you had to pick one, your top lesson, what would that be in terms of what you want to teach your kids about money?
Well, I guess one of the founding principles is you've got to earn enough money to cover your lifestyle, the cost of your lifestyle. So if you can help your kids understand what that lifestyle costs, that's a good start. And whether that lifestyle is an expensive lifestyle or a cheap lifestyle, that's helpful. And then where is the income coming from to fund that lifestyle? For me, I've always had quite expensive tastes. And my mum used to say, well, your tastes are so expensive. And my rebuttal was, well, I'm just going to earn enough money so that I can live the lifestyle I want. For my husband, he could literally get away with this. He could just live on the smell of an oily rag. You know, I draw the line when you have to reuse a tea bag. I just draw the line. But for some people, they're open to doing that. I think just understand what you need to be happy, and that there's a financial requirement attached to that. Money doesn't make you happy, but the absence of money can make you unhappy. You need to use leverage and benefit from leverage. That is probably the single biggest tool to accelerate your progress. So all effort, in my mind, should be in teaching our kids how to use leverage, which is using the bank's money to make money. Depending on how old the child is, it's going to make different, you know, they're going to make different choices that are age appropriate. But I think delaying gratification without an assurance that it's going to give you what you need is a waste of time. And I think we should be teaching our kids to assess that before they compromise or give something up, make sure the trade-off is going to be worth it for them. That would be it. But thank you for having me. I enjoyed chatting to you. I hope you got something out of today's session. I could rabbit on for ages, but I'm going to go home and make sure that my son is studying for his exams next week.
Thank you, Hannah.